What if the most dangerous type of avoidant isn't the one who just disappears, but the one who stays long enough to destroy you? Most people think the worst kind of avoidant is the one who ghosts you or pulls the classic disappearing act. But there's something far more sinister lurking in the attachment world. Something that doesn't just leave you confused or heartbroken, it leaves you questioning your own reality and worth as a human being. This isn't about someone who struggles with intimacy and runs away. This isn't about the typical push-pull dynamic that leaves you dizzy. This is about a specific breed of avoidant that operates with a level of calculated coldness that can literally rewire your brain for trauma. The reason most people never see this coming is simple. These individuals don't fit the typical avoidant profile. They don't seem emotionally unavailable at first. They don't appear to struggle with commitment. In fact, they often present as confident, successful, and surprisingly engaged in the relationship. But underneath that polished exterior lies something chilling, a combination of emotional detachment so profound that they can watch you suffer without feeling anything, paired with a vindictive streak that emerges the moment they perceive any threat to their control or image. What makes this type particularly dangerous is their patience. Unlike other avoidants who bolt at the first sign of real intimacy, these individuals will stay. They'll invest time, energy, and resources into the relationship. They'll meet your friends and family. They'll make future plans. They'll even say they love you and mean it in their own twisted way. But here's where it gets terrifying. They're collecting information the entire time. Every insecurity you share, every fear you confide, every vulnerable moment you have, it's all being catalogued and stored away for potential future use. Not consciously necessarily, but their minds work like databases, filing away your weaknesses for the day they might need them. The first red flag that separates this dangerous type from regular avoidance is their reaction to your emotional needs. A typical avoidant might withdraw, shut down, or become uncomfortable when you're upset or need support. This dangerous type does something different. They watch you with cold curiosity, like they're studying a specimen under a microscope. When you cry, they don't leave the room. They stay and observe. When you're anxious, they don't get triggered and pull away. They ask probing questions about what specifically is making you feel that way. When you share a childhood trauma or deep fear, they don't change the subject. They want to hear every detail. At first, this might feel like genuine interest and emotional availability. You might think you've finally found someone who can handle your emotions without running away, but pay close attention to their facial expressions during these moments. There's something missing, genuine empathy. They're interested, but not because they care about your pain. They're interested because they're learning how you work. This information-gathering phase can last months or even years. During this time, they function almost like emotional vampires, feeding off your vulnerability while giving just enough back to keep you invested. They'll remember details about your past that even close friends forget. They'll bring up conversations from months ago with startling accuracy. They'll seem incredibly attuned to your emotions and needs. But there's always something slightly off about their responses. When they comfort you, it feels a bit mechanical. When they celebrate your successes, there's a subtle undertone of competition or dismissal. When they say they love you, it sounds more like they're stating a fact than expressing a feeling. The second major warning sign is their relationship with control. Unlike typical avoidants who avoid control by avoiding intimacy altogether, this dangerous type seeks to control through intimacy. They use the closeness you crave as a weapon to manipulate your behavior and emotions. They'll start small. Maybe they'll suggest that certain friends of yours are bad influences. Maybe they'll point out how your family doesn't really understand you like they do. Maybe they'll offer to help you with decisions in ways that gradually reduce your independence. The insidious part is that it all sounds reasonable and caring. They're not overtly controlling like an obvious abuser would be. Instead, they use their knowledge of your insecurities and fears to subtly guide you toward dependence on them. If you've always struggled with self-doubt, they'll position themselves as the voice of reason you can trust. If you've had difficult relationships with family, they'll become your new primary support system. If you're naturally anxious, they'll offer to handle more and more of your life's decisions to reduce your stress. What's happening is that they're systematically isolating you and creating a dynamic where you need their approval and guidance for everything. But unlike other controlling personalities who might be possessive out of their own insecurity or attachment needs, this type is creating dependence for strategic purposes. The third red flag is their relationship with conflict. Most avoidants hate conflict and will do anything to avoid it. This dangerous type doesn't avoid conflict, they weaponize it. They're masters at turning any disagreement into a psychological warfare session where you end up apologizing for things you didn't even do. They never raise their voices. They never resort to obvious manipulation tactics like name-calling or threats. Instead, they use surgical precision to hit exactly where they know it will hurt most. They'll bring up that insecurity you shared 6 months ago. They'll reference that trauma you confided in them about. They'll use your own words against you in ways that leave you speechless. After one of these conflicts, you'll find yourself questioning everything. Did you overreact? Were you being unreasonable? Are you actually the problem in this relationship? This isn't accident. It's the intended outcome. They want you confused, destabilized, and doubting your own perceptions. The most chilling aspect of their conflict style is the calm, almost clinical way they deliver devastating blows to your self-esteem. While you're emotionally activated and upset, they remain eerily composed, speaking to you like a disappointed parent addressing a misbehaving child. They might say things like, "I'm concerned about how you're handling this situation. It reminds me of what you told me about your relationship with your mother," or "I can see why your ex said you were too emotional." You're proving their point right now. Or, "Maybe you should talk to someone about these anger issues you seem to have." Notice how they never take responsibility for their part in the conflict. Notice how they turn your emotional response into evidence of your character flaws. Notice how they reference private information you shared to make their point. This isn't someone who's emotionally triggered and lashing out. This is someone who's strategically dismantling your self-confidence. The fourth warning sign is what happens when you try to establish boundaries or push back against their behavior. A typical avoidant might withdraw or shut down when confronted. Some might even apologize or try to work things out. This dangerous type escalates. The moment you show signs of independence, critical thinking, or resistance to their influence, something shifts in their demeanor. The mask starts to slip, and you begin to see the cold calculation underneath their charming exterior. They might become suddenly very interested in your schedule and whereabouts. They might start making subtle comments about your appearance, your intelligence, or your capabilities. They might begin pointing out ways that you're failing in the relationship or in life generally. If you call them out directly on their behavior, they'll deploy what experts call DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. They'll deny that they ever did what you're accusing them of, attack your credibility or mental state, and position themselves as the real victim in the situation. They might say things like, "I never said that, you're imagining things. You're being incredibly unfair to me right now. I've done nothing but support you, and this is how you repay me. I'm starting to think you have some serious trust issues that have nothing to do with me." The goal is to make you feel like you're losing your mind. They want you to question your own memory, your own perceptions, and your own judgment. This is gaslighting at its most sophisticated level, and it's particularly effective because they've spent so long studying exactly how your mind works. What makes this type truly dangerous is their long-term memory for perceived slights and their patience in getting revenge. Unlike someone who might explode in anger and get it over with, this type will remember every time you questioned them, challenged them, or made them feel criticized. They'll file it away and wait for the perfect moment to make you pay. The revenge doesn't come as obvious retaliation. Instead, it comes as a systematic campaign to undermine your confidence, your relationships, and your stability. They might start sharing private information about you with mutual friends, framed as concern for your well-being. They might begin to subtly sabotage your work or personal goals. They might launch a charm offensive with your family and friends, positioning themselves as the reasonable one who's trying to help you through your issues. The most devastating part of their revenge tactics is how they use your own vulnerabilities against you. Remember all those deep conversations where you shared your fears, traumas, and insecurities? Now those become weapons in their arsenal. If you confided about childhood abuse, they might suggest to others that your trauma responses are making you paranoid and difficult to deal with. If you shared struggles with depression or anxiety, they might frame your reactions to their behavior as symptoms of your mental health issues. If you told them about past relationship failures, they might use those patterns to explain why you're overreacting to their perfectly reasonable behavior. This is psychological warfare disguised as concern and support. They know exactly which buttons to push because you gave them the instruction manual during all those intimate conversations when you thought you were building trust and connection. The fifth and perhaps most dangerous characteristic is their ability to recruit others into their narrative. Unlike obvious abusers who isolate their victims completely, this type often maintains a wide social circle and uses that network to validate their version of reality. They're skilled at presenting a compelling, reasonable version of events that makes you look like the unstable one. They might say things like, "I'm really worried about Sarah. She's been acting paranoid and accusing me of things I never did. I think she might need professional help." Because they've maintained their charming, composed exterior with everyone else, their claims seem credible. Meanwhile, you're often emotional, upset, and struggling to articulate what's been happening to you. Your distress becomes evidence that their concerns about your mental state are valid. This creates a devastating isolation where the very people you might turn to for support start questioning your version of events. Friends and family might suggest that you're being too sensitive, that you're sabotaging a good relationship, or that you need to work on yourself before you can have a healthy partnership. The genius of this manipulation is that it makes you completely dependent on their validation. When everyone else is questioning your sanity, the person who's driving you crazy becomes the only one who can make you feel sane again. They alternate between being the source of your distress and the only person who seems to understand you. This creates what psychologists call trauma bonding, an addictive cycle where you become chemically dependent on the same person who's harming you. Your brain starts associating relief from pain with their presence even when they're the ones causing the pain in the first place. What makes recovery from this type of relationship so difficult is the way it systematically destroys your ability to trust your own judgment. By the time you recognize what's happening, you've been so thoroughly gaslighted that you doubt your own perceptions about everything. You might find yourself constantly second-guessing your reactions to situations. You might start apologizing for things that aren't your fault. You might lose the ability to make decisions without seeking external validation. You might develop anxiety disorders, depression, or complex PTSD symptoms that persist long after the relationship ends. The most insidious part is that this type of avoidant often maintains contact after the relationship officially ends. They might reach out periodically to check on you, especially during times when they know you might be vulnerable. They might send birthday messages or holiday greetings that seem caring but actually serve to keep you tethered to their emotional manipulation. These contact attempts often come right when you're starting to heal and move forward. Just as you're beginning to trust your own judgment again and rebuild your self-esteem, they'll appear with a message that sends you spiraling back into confusion and self-doubt. So how do you protect yourself from this most dangerous type of avoidant? The first step is recognizing that traditional relationship advice doesn't apply here. This isn't someone who's struggling with vulnerability or commitment issues that can be worked through with patience and understanding. This is someone with a fundamentally different neurological makeup who lacks the capacity for genuine empathy. You cannot love them into being different. You cannot set enough boundaries to make them respect you. You cannot communicate effectively enough to make them understand how their behavior affects you. These approaches will only provide them with more information to use against you. The only effective strategy is complete disconnection, what experts call no contact. This means blocking them on all platforms, changing your phone number if necessary, and refusing all attempts at communication. It means not responding to their messages, not accepting their gifts, and not engaging with their attempts to hoover you back into their web. No contact is particularly difficult with this type because they're so skilled at making their outreach seem reasonable and caring. They might reach out with concerns about your health, offers to return your belongings, or updates about mutual friends. Every contact attempt is designed to seem innocent while actually serving to maintain their psychological hold over you. It's also crucial to begin rebuilding your relationship with reality and your own perceptions. Start keeping a journal of events and conversations. Write down your thoughts and feelings without editing or second-guessing yourself. The goal is to strengthen your connection to your own experience and rebuild trust in your own judgment. Consider working with a therapist who specializes in psychological abuse and trauma bonding. Regular therapy approaches often aren't sufficient for recovering from this level of psychological manipulation. You need someone who understands the specific ways this type of abuse operates and can help you identify and counter the gaslighting techniques that were used against you. Be prepared for the fact that mutual friends and family members might not understand your decision to cut contact completely. They may have been charmed by this person and convinced that you're overreacting or being vindictive. This is part of the isolation strategy, and it's important not to let their opinions override your need to protect yourself. Recovery from this type of relationship often involves grieving not just the loss of the person, but the loss of your former sense of self. You might need to rebuild your identity from scratch, rediscover your own preferences and opinions, and learn to trust your instincts again. This process can take years, but it's absolutely possible with the right support and commitment to healing. One of the most challenging aspects of recovery is dealing with what experts call emotional flashbacks. These are sudden, overwhelming feelings that transport you back to moments when you were being psychologically manipulated. You might be having a normal day when something triggers a memory of their cold stare, their calculated words, or the feeling of being completely invalidated. These flashbacks can be triggered by seemingly innocent things, a certain tone of voice, a facial expression, or even specific words that they use to manipulate you. Your nervous system learned to associate these triggers with danger, and it takes time and conscious effort to retrain your responses. During recovery, you might also experience what therapists call cognitive dissonance, the mental struggle of trying to reconcile the person who seemed to love you with the person who systematically destroyed your self-worth. Your mind might keep searching for explanations that make their behavior seem less intentional or more understandable. This is your brain trying to protect you from the harsh reality that someone you trusted was capable of such calculated cruelty. It's easier to believe you misunderstood their intentions than to accept that they knew exactly what they were doing and chose to harm you anyway. You might find yourself making excuses for their behavior even after you've recognized the pattern. You might think about their difficult childhood, their past trauma, or their professional stress as explanations for their actions. While these factors might explain their behavior, they don't excuse it or make it any less damaging to you. Another common struggle in recovery is what's known as trauma bonding withdrawal. Your brain became chemically addicted to the cycle of tension and relief that characterized your relationship with this person. When that cycle ends, your brain goes through a withdrawal process similar to drug addiction. You might find yourself craving contact with them, even though you logically know they're harmful. You might feel intense loneliness, anxiety, or depression that seems to only be relieved by thoughts of reconciliation. This isn't weakness or evidence that you still love them. It's a neurochemical addiction that your brain developed as a survival mechanism. The withdrawal process can include physical symptoms like insomnia, loss of appetite, headaches, and panic attacks. Your body is literally detoxing from the stress hormones and adrenaline that became your normal state during the relationship. Understanding that these are normal physiological responses can help you be more patient with your healing process. Part of what makes this type so particularly destructive is their ability to create what psychologists call learned helplessness. Through their systematic undermining of your judgment and decision-making abilities, they trained your brain to believe that you're incapable of handling situations on your own. You might find that even simple decisions feel overwhelming after leaving this type of relationship. Choosing what to eat for dinner, deciding what to watch on television, or picking out clothes might trigger anxiety because you've been conditioned to doubt your own preferences and seek external validation for everything. This learned helplessness extends beyond daily decisions into major life choices. You might feel paralyzed when it comes to career decisions, living situations, or future relationships because their constant criticism and control eroded your confidence in your ability to make good choices for yourself. Rebuilding your decision-making confidence requires starting small and gradually working up to bigger choices. Begin by making low-stakes decisions without seeking anyone else's input. What to have for breakfast, which route to take to work, what music to listen to. Notice that you can make these choices and that the world doesn't end if they're not perfect. Another aspect of recovery involves recognizing and healing from what's called complex trauma, or CPTSD. Unlike single-incident trauma, complex trauma results from prolonged exposure to psychological abuse and manipulation. The symptoms can include emotional dysregulation, negative self-concept, and difficulties with relationships and concentration. You might notice that your emotional responses feel disproportionate to current situations. Small conflicts might trigger huge emotional reactions because your nervous system is still calibrated for the psychological warfare you experienced. Criticism might feel devastating because it activates memories of their systematic attacks on your character. Healing complex trauma often requires specialized therapeutic approaches like EMDR, somatic therapy, or trauma-informed cognitive behavioral therapy. Traditional talk therapy alone might not be sufficient because this type of trauma is stored in your body and nervous system, not just your conscious mind. It's also important to understand that recovery isn't linear. You might have days where you feel strong and clear about what happened, followed by days where you doubt yourself again and miss them terribly. You might make progress in trusting your judgment and then have a setback that makes you feel like you're back at square one. These ups and downs are normal and don't indicate that you're not healing properly. Recovery from psychological manipulation involves rewiring neural pathways that were carved deep through repetitive abuse. Your brain is literally rebuilding itself, and that process naturally includes setbacks and breakthroughs. One of the most important aspects of long-term recovery is learning to recognize the early warning signs in future relationships. This doesn't mean becoming paranoid or closed off to love. It means developing what experts call informed intuition. Pay attention to how potential partners respond to your boundaries, how they handle conflict, and how they treat people who can't benefit them. Notice whether they seem genuinely interested in your well-being or if their concern feels performative. Trust your gut when something feels off, even if you can't articulate exactly what's wrong. Be wary of anyone who seems too good to be true early in the relationship, who pushes for rapid intimacy, or who seems unusually interested in your past traumas and vulnerabilities. While genuine partners will care about your experiences, predators will probe for information they can potentially use later. Also be cautious of partners who try to isolate you from your support systems, who consistently make you doubt your perceptions, or who seem to have a pattern of relationships that ended with their exes being crazy or unstable. These are often red flags that indicate similar patterns of psychological manipulation. Recovery also involves rebuilding your relationship with your own body and nervous system. The chronic stress of being in a relationship with this type of manipulator often leads to physical health problems, digestive issues, autoimmune flare-ups, chronic pain, or sleep disorders. Learning to recognize and respond to your body's signals is crucial for long-term healing. This might involve practices like meditation, yoga, massage, or other somatic therapies that help you reconnect with your physical self and learn to trust your body's wisdom again. Your body often recognized the danger long before your mind did. Learning to listen to physical sensations like tension, nausea, or fatigue as information about your environment and relationships can serve as an early warning system for future manipulation attempts. The most important thing to remember is that nothing about this experience reflects your worth or value as a person. You weren't targeted because you're weak, damaged, or defective. You were targeted because you had qualities this type of predator needed: empathy, trust, and the capacity for genuine love. Your ability to bond deeply and trust completely isn't a flaw to be corrected. It's a strength to be protected. The goal isn't to become cynical or closed off to future relationships, but to develop better screening mechanisms and trust your instincts when something feels off. Understanding that this most dangerous type of avoidant exists is the first step in protecting yourself and others from their psychological destruction. They rely on people not recognizing their tactics, not trusting their own perceptions, and not understanding the systematic nature of their manipulation. The more awareness we can spread about these individuals, the fewer victims they can claim. Your healing isn't just about your own recovery. It's about breaking the cycle and preventing others from experiencing the same psychological devastation. Have you encountered this dangerous type of avoidant in your own life? Share in the comments what red flags you recognize now that you didn't see at the time, and what's been most helpful in your healing process. If this video helped you understand the difference between typical avoidant behavior and psychological manipulation, like this video and subscribe for more content about protecting yourself from toxic relationship dynamics and rebuilding your life after psychological abuse. Thanks for watching.